welcome to 10 Hours from Home. My name is Katie, and thank you so much for joining me because I'm excited after much trial and error that this podcast is up and running and launched and out in the world. Like I said, my name is Katie, and I am an American who lives abroad and has for the last 11 plus years in 3 different countries. I'm also a business owner and um, have been in fashion and design for almost 15 years. So basically, I'm just really excited to get into this conversation about living abroad. 10 Hours from Home is a podcast about all of the adventures and ups and downs of basically living and loving and administration and all of that good stuff of living abroad. Um, that's Stella. She's my little my significant other, aka my fur baby. So she got her French passport before I have. Rude. Anyway, so this podcast is basically all about my adventures of living abroad, and we're gonna talk to some of my friends and just kind of go over, you know, like what it is to live abroad, like all the crazy stories about like sitting in, a parking garage waiting for your visa in like inhaling toxic fumes or dating abroad or working fashion, like all that kind of stuff. Um, because that's been my life for the last 11 plus years. Just to give you a little bit of background about me, like I said, I have been in fashion for 15 years. And I started as a trend analyst at Macy's as an intern there when I was like 19 and learned so much. And then have been working in Paris or was working in Paris for small and large brands for a few years, and then started my own company in organic and fair trade fashion back in 2015. Um, and now it's kind of grown and developed into this other kind of thing that is all the things that I love most in this world, which are like teaching. So we have entrepreneurship education for those who are we're geared more towards creatives, so anybody who does anything in the creative field. um so we do lots of education about how to start your business, how to run your business, how to market your business. I also offer consulting for those who are interested in starting a sustainable or fair trade or both fashion brand, and kind of all the things that go into that, into like being truly sustainable, um, and not just sustainable for the buzzword of sustainable, um, and fair trade, because that is really near and dear to my heart. And also, I work on interior design in focusing on sustainable design. So I focus on what's considered, um, well, focused on secondary reuse architecture, which is basically like fixer-uppers and basically working within the context of what you have and making it beautiful rather than like starting from scratch. Because it's always going to be easier to upcycle what you're doing than it is to start from scratch and build something new. And me saying easier, I mean less impactful on the environment. Anyway, so that's a little bit about what I do, and how I got here, how I got through all of that, is kind of an interesting story just because so much of what I've done in my business and in my life is because of having this experience of living abroad. Um, and so, yeah, so the ironic thing about this whole podcast, 10 Hours from Home, thanks for the name to my friend Daniel, because he is the one who came up Sorry about Stella. He's the one who came up with it, because he said no matter where you are, you're always 10 hours from home because like California is 10 hours from Paris, Paris is 10 hours from California, Morocco, etc. Anyway, so so the irony of all of this is that I am starting this podcast about living abroad at my mom's house in the state that I was born in. So, um, totally full circle. Um, this is actually the third time I've tried to record this podcast, as it is. And so it's just kind of funny that, like, third time's a charm, and it is me in my mom's house in California. So, the origin story, uh, is that I was born in California. So I'm a California girl by birth. Uh, I was born in actually Silicon Valley, not too far from where Google is now headquartered. Uh, and when I was about 3 years old, we moved to Georgia, to a place called Buford, Georgia. It was just outside of Atlanta. So if you ever hear me like have some sort of like weird twang in my voice, or like if you ever hear me say ol or rule or any of those words that I can't actually say, so OIL and RURAL. So in case, there's any confusion, I will try to avoid all those words at all costs, but basically that's why, because my speech formative years were in Georgia with a bunch of country people. So I have a slight twang from time to time. Gets worse when I'm tired or I'm drunk. So hopefully neither of those will apply in this situation. So yeah, so I lived in Georgia, grew up in Georgia. And then we spent some time in Oregon, and then some time in Florida, and then ended up back in California. So, no, my mom is not in the military. My family's not a military family. My mom is just as nomadic as I am. And I actually think that's my grandparents' fault, to be perfectly honest, because they grew up in Kansas, born and raised in Kansas. All of my grandma's sisters still live in Kansas, like all close to each other. Or, well, I guess now technically they don't all live next to each other. But anyway, the plan was basically for them all to be neighbors and to live near the lake where my great grandfather had his resort. And my grandma and my grandpa moved to California, to start their life as a married couple. And then they moved to Georgia to retire, and then again to Florida to retire. And so that's kind of like our trajectory, was like we moved to Georgia to be near them, and then my mom moved to Oregon because it was cheaper than moving back to California. And then my grandpa got sick, we moved to Florida to be closer to them, and then we fled and moved back to California because I don't think I really need to explain Florida to anybody. But we definitely will get into that on a later episode with somebody I affectionately call my little brother, but he's not mine. He's a friend of mine's that I adopted, as my own little brother. So anyway, so we will definitely get into Florida later for those of you who may not know. Um, but anyway, so I think that kind of, like, I don't want to say nomadic because it's definitely not nomadic in the traditional sense, but it's definitely wasn't the childhood of, like, I grew up right down the street from where my mom grew up, and she stayed here her whole life and I stayed here my whole life. So I think that really informed the way that I kind of felt more secure in some of the moves that I made, um, jumping across the Atlantic Ocean. So, to kind of get into that story, I was going to school in San Francisco at the Academy of Art University. I went there for college. I got my bachelor's degree in fashion business. And so I was in school in San Francisco, and I had the school internship. And then I got into 3 car accidents, like back to back to back, basically. So one was 1 month. The first one was actually Super Fat Tuesday when Obama and Hillary were in the primaries, and it was their like runoff day. And I remember it because I was on the way to my favorite bar in San Francisco that no longer exists, um, called Farmer Brown. And I was underage, so it was my favorite bar because I could get in my one of my best friends was the bartender. Um, so I want to preface this by saying all 3 car accidents, none of them were my fault, okay? So, like, I just want disclaimer mode, like, I was not the driver in the first one. I was the, like, hittee, not the hitter in the other ones. So, like, I'm a good driver, I swear it's not. But I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse. Like, maybe you don't ever wanna be in a car with me because, like, maybe my luck. Anyway, so it was Super Fat Tuesday. We got T-boned. I had a concussion. Still went to the bar because I was like 20, 19, 20. So, concussion, tequila, hospital tequila. I went with tequila. So I went to the bar, ended up at the hospital at the end of the night because, like, I really did have a concussion and, like, adding tequila to a concussion wasn't a great idea. But anyway, so then the following month was the next accident, and that one was, like, crazy awful too. And then the month after that was a simple one, but it was just ironic because I was the last in the line of cars. So this woman was coming from the right, and it was a one-way street, and I was all the way on the far left, and she missed car A, B, C, and D, or A, B, and C, and then hit me, car D, at the very end. So it was just like, I had this, like, come to Jesus moment where I was like, if I'm gonna die, because that seems to be like the trajectory that I'm on, I might as well go on an adventure. So that was kind of like the first seeds that were planted into my brain about, like, what should I do next? Like, I want to go somewhere, I want to see something new, I want to, like, experience something else. So in my brain, I thought, okay, I speak Spanish, I'll go to Spain. So I started researching schools in Spain so that I could, like, transfer to a school there and finish my degree. Um, so I found a school in Barcelona and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." And Barcelona is like, it's like next Paris, right? That's how they were billing it. Was like, it's the up and coming, like, design and fashion city, which, I mean, not for nothing. Barcelona is a great city, and the fashion's really cool, but it's a very specific type of fashion. Like, and everyone says, like, "Oh, it's the up and coming Paris," but Paris is always Paris. It's going to be the Paris until the end of time. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever, like, however you want to view that. And we will definitely, again, get into that, um, the fashion industry and being in Paris and the fashion industry and all of that, in a later episode. But it will always be Paris. Paris is always Paris. Um, so anyway, so I'm thinking, okay, great. I found a school. It's great. I speak Spanish, no problem. Like, let's move to Barcelona. Well, like, the joke was on me because in Barcelona, they speak Catalan, right? So Catalan is it's not a dialect of Spanish, which is what you would think, right? Because each region has their own dialect and blah blah blah. Same's true for any country, right? Americans never think that they have an accent, but we all have an accent. It's an American accent, and some of us have a southern accent, and some of us have a northern accent, and some of us have, like, a Cali girl accent, and so, like, everybody has an accent. But anyway, so I'm thinking it's a dialect of Spanish, and, like, I'll be fine. No, it's a completely different language. And so I moved to Barcelona to speak Spanish, and nobody speaks well, they speak Spanish. Let's not, like, mince words, but they speak Spanish, but they don't like to because there was a whole political situation with Franco as the dictator, and he forced the Catalans to speak Spanish, and they couldn't speak their own language, and it was like this really horrible situation. So anyway, um, long story less long. Um, I was there and I was like, okay, well, like, I really love it here, but, like, also I kind of had, like, these awful experiences as being an au pair, which, again, we'll get into in a later episode. Um, and so I always wanted to live in Paris. Like, when I went there for the first time when I was 16, I told my mom, I said, "I wanna live here one day. Like, this is amazing." And so, being the Pisces that I am, I definitely manifested that. And so I spent a year in Barcelona, which was a really cool year, mostly drunk. like, if I'm really honest. And again, we'll talk about that in another episode with a friend of mine, um, who I was drunk a lot with, and had a lot of fun with. But anyway, we will get into that too because I was 22, 21, 22 in Barcelona and just having the time of my life in Barcelona. And so it was a great year. And then after that year, I ended up moving to Paris and much to the like celebration of a friend that I met there when I actually first moved to Barcelona. One of the first things I did was go to Paris before school started, and I met this crazy Italian who convinced me to move to Paris, basically, because I had been there like 4 times in the time that I lived in Barcelona. And so a year later, I packed everything up and moved to Paris, not speaking a word of French other than bonjour and je m'appelle Cathy. Um, and then spent 9 years in Paris, almost 10. It'll be my 10-year anniversary in Paris in August of 2021. So this year. Um, and yeah, and in Paris, let's see, I spent most of my adult life abroad, but most of my adult life in Paris, actually. So I was 22 when I moved there. No, 23 when I moved there and like spent, you know, most of my 20s in Paris. And really grew up there and got my first job there and started my business there and closed my business there because I failed at my business and then opened a new business because that one, is on a better path. Got married, got divorced. Let's see, was an intern, was a student, was a single person, a dog mom. It's where Stella came from. She was born in Paris, in Brittany. Um, and we'll get into all of that too, because I mean, that's a whole nother world too, traveling with a pet. Anyway, so we will talk about all of these things throughout our time together on this podcast. Um, and then one day, so my time in Paris was, I will say, it's probably the other place beyond Morocco. Like Barcelona was fun and I consider it a really cool place that I've lived. But I will say that Paris and Morocco have really captured my heart for better or for worse. Um, and those are the places that I do consider home. So, outside of California, where my mom is. So in Paris, let's see. Yeah, I mean, like I said, student, employer, teacher, like all kinds of stuff that I've done in Paris. Um, and just really grown up there. And, we'll get into kind of all the stories about like visas and traveling and, all of that good stuff later on in our episodes. Um, but I will say about Paris is that some of my favorite things to do in Paris is just enjoy the architecture and the city of Paris. Like you can have fun in Paris for $0. Like you just grab or €5. You know what I mean? Like you just grab your Villib, which because I'm okay. So this is my thing, and everybody makes fun of me. But like I love the city share bikes in Paris. So it's called the Vélib, which means like free bike, right? So they have the Autolib and they have the Vlib and they have the Scootlib now or something like that. And so basically like it's the shitty the shitty share bikes, the shit the city share bikes that they have in Paris. And you just take one and you ride to where you go and then you put it in your little dock and then when you're ready to leave, you take it and anyway. So, this is how I spend most of my time when it's not raining or freezing cold in Paris is like taking my little bike and biking around the city and literally just falling in love with it all over again because the architecture is amazing and it, it's such a beautiful city that you cannot beat doing that. Now, that being said, I will tell you some traumatizing stories for sure, about, like, administration and, certain encounters, dating stories, which I think are, universally bad in a lot of cases until you find the right one, right? Um, but I will say that Paris, you can just take your little bike or walk around or whatever and just fall in love with the city because it's just beautiful. It really is. It's probably the most beautiful city I've ever been to in all and of the places that I've been. Um, so anyway, and of course, Paris gave me Morocco because one night I met this Moroccan uh, at a cafe and we connected and we had a conversation. We probably spent 3 hours together. And then on a complete leap of faith, I got on a plane and spent a week in Morocco with this random person that I had only spent a few hours in a cafe with. Um, and with my time in Morocco, like that week, I just remember I was sitting on a balcony in Marrakesh at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sky was just filled with stars. Like I had never seen so many stars. And, like you go to, like I've done many cross country trips in the US, and like there are some dark places in the US where you can see a ton of stars, but I still had never seen stars like this. And then in the background, you hear the call to prayer. And in that moment, I fell in love with Morocco. And in that moment, I decided that this is where I wanted to be. Because, as beautiful as Paris is, it's very gray for a lot of the year. And I was like, in this place where, oh, Stella's coming to join us now. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see her little booty behind me. Um, Otherwise, you can just hear her little jingle jangle. So anyway, um, it was like that moment that I fell in love with Morocco, and I was like, "Oh no, I need to be here." So I started looking for a job, got a job right away to kind of like ease myself into like living there because one of the nice things about it is when you have like a formal job, even though I was working for myself at the time, um it was easier to meet people and like make connections and like talk, through just teaching English or whatever. And then that turned into like teaching at a university and teaching fashion. And anyway, so it was a really cool experience. Um, so anyway, I got a job before I got there, and I figured out that it was actually much cheaper to produce in Morocco because at the time I was doing made in France, which was fairly expensive in a small run. So I could work with artisans in Morocco for a lot cheaper than I was working in France, but still doing it fair trade and locally source the materials. And so it just was like a really all around easy experience. And then um, I also uh, found an apartment before I moved there, like connected with uh, I can't think of the word in English. This will happen often. Um, a real estate agent, and he found this amazing apartment. And mind you, when I was in Paris, I was sharing a 500 square foot apartment with another person. And in Morocco, for half the price, I had an 1,100 square foot apartment with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and I probably honestly only lived in about 500 square feet of it. But, anyway, neither here nor there. Um, so I found the apartment, and then again, on another, like, leap of faith, this man that I spent 3 hours in a cafe and a week on vacation with, I wired him a bunch of money so he could, like, just put everything in place. Even though I had found it, he, like, paid everybody that needed to be paid, etcetera, and got my house keys, and I just moved to Morocco, and I'm sure scared the shit out of him because he was like, I mean, like, legit, we went on, like, one date and then you moved here. But that's not why I moved there. Um, anyway, I literally loved Morocco. I still love Morocco. And so anyway, so I lived in Morocco until November 2019, and ironically, I had a ticket to go back on March 16th, and then the world just decided that that wasn't going to happen. So, um, I left Morocco in November to go back to Paris just to kind of reset a little bit. And like, I was really spending a lot of time like going back and forth because I never actually officially got my Moroccan residency because I was going back and forth so much that I really was splitting my time kind of between the two. And that had to do with like, it was in the process of getting a divorce and my visa in France and, like business and apartment and all kinds of stuff. So, anyway, so it was a lot of back and forth. And I had gone back to France and I was planning on going back to Morocco, and then the world shut down. And um, right before it did, there was some family health things that were going on. So I decided that I would come home because I didn't want to be stuck so far away from my family if anything happened. Um, and I'm really happy that I made that decision in the end. But that's how I ended up here in California in my mom's house for the last year and a half. And I have actually been back to Paris just for some visa stuff and like, you know, some administration stuff that I've had to take care of. And in a few weeks I will be back and we can talk to my friends and it'll be great. But for now, the universe has a sense of humor, and we are starting this Life Abroad podcast where I was born. So anyway, um, so yeah, that's a little bit about what we're gonna get into, and we're gonna talk about everything from like, travel bug, like what do you do when, you just want to kind of explore. Um, we're gonna talk about visas and how to get them and the different kinds. We're going to talk about, let's see, making friends abroad. Like, I'm kind of an introverted person. I'm an outgoing person and like I don't know how like I'm an outgoing person and I'm an outspoken person, but I'm kind of put me in a party and I'm a little bit shy. So, we're going to talk about making friends even when you're an introvert when you're living abroad. Um we're going to talk about bank accounts and apartments and like how all of that happens. Hi Bugs. Hi. So, anyway, we're going to talk about adopting pets abroad and the the crazy things that happen when you do that, and then traveling with them because Stella has been to many places around this world. Um and so thank God she's a really good traveler and she's really like go with the flow in terms of a dog. um, so she's been all over with me. We're gonna talk about like politics and you know pressing issues that are happening in the world today. We're gonna talk about dating and we're gonna talk about fashion and we're gonna talk about marriage and divorce and religion. So, all kinds of interesting topics that I'm going to talk to my friends about from their perspective, in terms of like what they went through. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun things, and we're going to talk to my friends and just have conversations about like, you know, what happens when you get off the plane in a new country and you're like, holy shit, what did I do? Um, or, funny dating stories, or like, um, a couple of crazy stories about, my time in Barcelona or whatever the case may be. Um, so anyways, I'm really excited to kind of get this party started and to have these conversations. Has been a great excuse to reconnect with some of my friends again. Um, and some of my adopted family. Like I said, my little baby brother, my Moroccan brother, is gonna be on our upcoming episode about visas and moving abroad. So, It's gonna be really exciting, I hope, and, like, really informative, but also I want it to be lighthearted because this is, you know, it's about, like, learning and enjoying and, like, laughing at all of our stupid mistakes that we've made along the way, and, so that's what this is about having a good time, maybe learning some stuff, maybe getting the courage or to, you know, jump on a plane once we all can jump on planes again, um, and live abroad, or even if you're already living abroad and listening to this, maybe you can relate to some of these ridiculous stories. And anyway, so I really am looking forward to just having a good time with you guys and having a good time with my friends and having an interesting conversation. So, with that being said, welcome to 10 Hours Abroad. Please join us on Instagram at 10, the number 10 hours from home. And feel free to reach out to us at hello@atelierkate.com because we're going through my business website. It'll be the easiest way as we start this off to connect with each other. And that'll give us all an opportunity to have this really cool conversation, which is the objective. Like, I really want to have a conversation with people who are interested in this my story and have their own story and maybe interested in moving abroad, whatever the case may be. Feel free to reach out, feel free to join us, um and yeah, let's let's have fun together. Like, I'm so excited. So yeah, like, subscribe, share, rate, review, all those things that help us to grow. So join us next week. um Next week, we're going to talk about actually, like, the mistakes that we make when we're traveling, like the funny stories that you hear about when, like the ugly American stories or the embarrassing stories or the things that you think about when you were first traveling that you're like, oh God, I would never do that now. So if you have one of those stories, feel free to reach out to me again on Instagram at 10 hours from home, the number 10 hours from home, or hello@atelierkate.com. So it's hello@atelierkate.com. And I will definitely love to hear your stories, and we'll talk about that and all kinds of other things on that next episode and just keep going from there. So, thank y'all for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye. I just want to say a quick shout out to Jewel Ramada, as she is my amazing sound engineer for this podcast. And if you need anything for her, she does Reiki, and she's a great sound engineer. She's done all of my courses for my online stuff, and she's done this podcast, and just she is the sound guru. She is at Jewel Ramada, or Reiki Jewel, on Instagram. And yeah, so she's amazing. And also, I want to say a huge thank you to Nuhaila, who used to be my student and now is an amazing branding company. She's created this amazing branding company, and she has helped me with every step of this podcast in terms of like marketing and like helping me get my shit together. So if you guys need anything, any help with Instagram or any help with branding or whatever, I highly recommend her. She can work virtually. She's in Morocco right now. I'm in California, and we get stuff done all the time thanks to her, not thanks to me. Like, she keeps me on track with deadlines and Instagram and all that good stuff. So if you need any of those things, contact those two girls because they are amazing and they have helped make this happen. So, thank you all again for listening, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. I'll say that Stella has been like chilling outside literally all day until I decided to record this first podcast. Like, literally all day. She's just been hanging out, and now all of a sudden she's decided that she needs to have her presence known and run around the house.